What's going on, guys? Top Tier Gaming here, and today I have an interesting discussion topic to talk about, sort of concerning Weiss Schwarz's popularity in the West, and maybe why it isn't having the following or the popularity one might want for their card game. And there's a bunch of reasons why I think this is the case, and I'm just gonna explain and go over those reasons throughout this video. So I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone if I made the statement that Weiss Schwarz is not super popular in the West, because chances are there's a lot of you very similar to my own situation where you don't even have a locals to go play at. Where I live, there is no locals to play at. I just play with my friends because there's just not a big enough scene to support a locals in most places. So unless you live in California or New York or maybe some parts of Texas, there's just a good chance you don't have a very strong Weiss Schwarz community, or a locals for that matter. Now, I did say the West because actually Weiss Schwarz as a game does really well for itself over in Japan. I have an image here showing a sales bracket over the course of a couple of months, where Weiss Schwarz actually ranked 4th as one of the more popular card games in product sales, where it actually beat Vanguard at number 6 and Magic at number 5, which is very, very impressive. Only losing to Duel Masters, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon, which are the big 3 card games in Japan, I guess. So this is mostly in relation to how Weiss Schwarz's popularity is in the West, which would be mostly America is what I'm going to be talking about, just because I live here, I have more experience with it. I'm not quite sure how the community is in South America or Europe, but I assume it has the same problems it does here, if not even further exacerbated by smaller card game player count numbers in general. So I think one of the points that people bring up when talking about why maybe Weiss Schwarz is less popular here than in Japan is a pretty obvious one, and that's just that more people in Japan watch anime, which further entices them to play the game Weiss Schwarz. And while I think it's definitely true that there are more anime watchers in Japan, I'm not quite sure that this alone is the sole reason why Weiss Schwarz is less popular here than over there. So while it's true that more people in Japan watch anime than in America, I don't think that actually changes too much about the sort of player bases that we see over here. I mean, it definitely does contribute, but we're in the realm of card games, right? Which is a section of nerd culture along with anime, video games. So while most people in America definitely do not watch anime, if you go to a place that is a part of nerd culture, say a local card shop, I'm gonna say that the chances that people in there watch anime actually increases. So this is mostly empirical, so take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But if I walk into a card shop, your local card shop that sells Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Vanguard, Pokemon, and say there are about 30 people in the shop, and I ask the question, raise your hand if you watch anime, and then I go into a Starbucks or I don't know, a Barnes & Noble where there are also 30 people, and I ask the same question, I'm gonna make the bold assumption that there would be more hands raised in the card shop, right? Because if you're a part of one section of nerd culture, it's not too unusual to find yourself in others, other cultures as well. It's not always the case, but I think there definitely is some sort of truth there. So with all that being said, I do think that if you find yourself in a place like a card shop, you are much more likely to find people who both play card games and watch anime. And that leads into a point where I feel like the United States, especially as a whole, has just more card game players that a game like Weiss Schwarz can reach out to in this sense than Japan. And I say that based on a few instances where, first of all, the population of the United States is 329 million, and the population of Japan is 126 million people. So just on that alone, there's a higher chance that there are more card game players in America. While that alone doesn't say much, because it could just not be true in the sense that there could be more card game players in Japan despite the lower population. But just based on premier events that we've had in the past, I would say that places like the United States hold more card game players. So if you go back to around 2012 or 2013, YCS Long Beach actually set the record for the biggest card game tournament. It was held in Long Beach, California. So that event actually had 4,364 attendees, which, it set the record at the time. And then the record was again broken in America by the Magic Grand Prix in Las Vegas. So yeah, that Grand Prix actually had about 7,551 players or attendees that signed up for the event, and that still holds like the record. So both the first and second place records were held in the United States, and that's just like the biggest premier events, right? It doesn't say anything about averages, but in around 2011, 2012 Yu-Gi-Oh, there used to be a site many people would go to. I don't know if it still exists, but you could just see the difference in averages from like regional numbers. Like if you check the winning deck lists for regionals in Japan, very often you see the regional numbers hit like 80 to 90, rarely breaking like the 100 mark. But regionals in the United States, while of course in some less populated areas would only hit around 100, it was not uncommon to see 600 person regional flights for Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially in like the Houston area, California area. You would have very huge average attendees at these events, and that's why I'm just making the assumption that there are more card game players in America that Weiss Schwarz could actually reach out to. So despite the fact that there are more anime watchers in Japan as a whole, when you're looking at just like local card shops, it wouldn't be unusual to state that there are many anime watchers amongst these people, and we just have more card game players in general. So I don't think that the anime argument as a whole is the sole reason why Weiss Schwarz is seeing less popularity in America. So there are a couple of things that I think could also be actually attributing to the fact that Weiss Schwarz is not very popular in the West, while it is very popular in Japan. And there's one big reason that we're kind of split between circuits. So there's actually an English circuit in America, and there's a Japanese circuit, which is the WGP. And it sort of, I don't want to say always splits the player base, because there's a big portion of the player base that plays both, but there are limiting factors on both ends depending on which circuit you're in. For the English circuit, of course, like a limiting factor on why people might not play is a definite lack in sets, right? Like say a Yu-Gi-Oh player wants to start playing the game, and his favorite anime is Steins Gate, and he wants to play in English. Well, Steins Gate currently, as of making this video, is not an English set, so it might push him off from playing the game in general. So by the same token, take the same Yu-Gi-Oh player that wants to start playing, say we're set Steins Gate, he finds out it's in JP, but then he also finds out that he needs to have translations, he has to actually learn what his cards do without being able to read them, and this language barrier also, I would say, stops people from wanting to play that circuit in the US. It's like very intimidating, especially when you're not used to it. So that could definitely be a reason. Like the circuits in general are kind of, they have their own divides for people wanting to come into the game. Again, I don't think this is the only reason why Weiss Schwarz isn't seeing many more players, but I think it does contribute in some way. So one of the bigger reasons for me on why the game isn't seeing the popularity I think it should in the West in general is marketing. So especially in my area this holds true, but it's true for pretty much everywhere in the States. I've been to a lot of different places and I have yet to see this, but the game isn't sold in like any large place. Like you couldn't go to Walmart and pick up your pack of Weiss Schwarz cards. Maybe there's some Walmart out there that has it, but definitely not any near me. And this holds true for things like Target, like Walgreens. These are big like supermarkets in America that they're just like superstores in general. And Weiss Schwarz isn't sold there, so it's not getting any like publicity in a place that you could find a lot of players purchasing their cards. Weiss Schwarz mostly gets its like publicity from local card shops, and there's definitely a lack of card shops like advertising Weiss Schwarz. And that's sort of like the vicious cycle where Weiss Schwarz isn't that popular, so people are less likely to advertise it, and because it's not getting advertising, it's not getting more popular. So that I think that's one of the reasons is like marketing in general. In Japan, I've definitely seen the game be marketed in a bunch of different ways, like Blu-ray promos, even towel promos, like the Amelia and Rem, like Yukata promos. They were actually given away with bath towels, from my understanding. I've seen it appear in anime, like actual Weiss Schwarz cards appear as like cameos and like OVAs, or things like that. So yeah, overall there's definitely a difference in marketing here, where you could even find Weiss Schwarz maybe in commercials. Like I've seen Japanese commercials that are advertising Weiss Schwarz, and we just do not have that here for the most part. So this lack of marketing definitely sort of creates like a lack of exposure for the game in general, where it's really hard to sort of get people into a game where they know like nothing about, like they don't see it on TV. So yeah, that's pretty much why I think like maybe marketing plays a big role. But one last thing that I think could be contributing to this lack of popularity is simply that it is trying to approach two different audiences. So while I did say earlier that there's a higher chance of a card game player watching anime, it doesn't always mean that they're super big into anime. And definitely on the anime front of things, there are many anime watchers who are not card game players, right? So Weiss Schwarz is attempting to reach at two different audiences, and that doesn't always work for like the card game aspect. Like I definitely see, you know, collectors who don't play card games collecting the cards because it is their favorite anime. I've seen Yu-Gi-Oh players buy the cards as like tokens. To actually like play the game and continually purchase product is like a different story altogether, and maybe just the fact that it is trying to reach out to audiences, it kind of puts itself back. But again, the game does so well in Japan. I think it could do just as well here. It just needs like more marketing, and of course, along with the other factors I stated earlier, there's just some things holding it back, where the game isn't as popular as maybe we'd like to see it. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Just an interesting discussion topic on why Weiss Schwarz isn't as popular as maybe we'd like to see. Because I'm sure we would all like it to be a lot more popular. I recently went to a WGP in Dallas, and there were 8 people, including my group from Shreveport, meaning if we didn't show up, that tournament was going to have 5 players, which these are definitely not numbers that you would like to boast about for sure. And yeah, so just a discussion topic on Weiss Schwarz not being as popular. Hopefully we can see one day that the game is more popular, and you know, it's definitely just bigger in general. And yeah, I really hope that that comes to pass one day. But for now, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me what you think in the comments below, because you know it is a discussion topic. I'd like to hear what you guys have to think. Leave a like, subscribe. This was Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.